Hello everyone, and welcome back to TSW2. This time we're going to be having a look at this curious looking thing, the Deutsche Bahn BR204, and I'll be playing through the shortest of the 4 scenarios that comes with this engine. And this thing it'll be interesting because this is the first time I've ever tried driving the 204, and I remember it's made by Rivet Games, which in my opinion is never a good sign, because aside from the Isle of Wight, I haven't seen a Rivet Games product that's really any good. And even then the Isle of Wight isn't that fantastic. Truly fantastic. Oh, this thing's loud. I shouldn't be surprised that this thing's loud, considering it's a ruddy diesel. Having a read of this message in the bottom left corner here. Yes, the obligatory lag. No offense to no personal attack against anyone who likes these things, but I honestly think this looks hideous. It's like a overweight. The best way I can describe this thing is like an overweight and blocky version of the Class 17. Although, come to think of, on a more positive note, it does remind me of the engine that Lego put in there. I think it was the red cargo train set many years back. I don't think I've got a set timetable for this scenario. It appears that I don't, which is a good thing in this instance, because it gives me some time to have a look around the engine. As it stands, from what I can just tell now, the idle sounds aren't that bad, at least in my opinion, but this is coming from someone that has never been to Germany in real life, let alone seen a real 204, so I can't comment on how accurate the sounds are. But as I said earlier, this thing wasn't actually made by Dovetail Games, but rather Rivet Games. They've also done like the Arosa, more recently they've done the Arosa line, the Isle of Wight, Arosa line, 1938 stock, and West Cornwall local. I haven't got WCL because from what I've seen of it in other videos, etc., it's one of the worst routes in TSW. The Arosa line is underwhelming, despite being just has very underwhelming scenery, despite being the first narrow gauge and the first Swiss route we've got in TSW. 1938 stock just has poor sounds, for being honest. And West Cornwall as a whole is a right big mess. Anyway, enough of blabbering about other Rivet products. Let's get into the cab of the BR204. And my god, like this thing is just to me, this thing just looks and feels so incredibly tall. Like, let's just look at this again. Right, you see this door? I mean, this must be one of the tallest, certainly one of the tallest cabs I've ever seen. Like, I've never seen an engine where the cab is so tall that the windows are actually above the door. Well, although this cab does kind of remind me of the DB BR363, and to a lesser extent the Vossloch G6. So 204358-6. I'll probably forget that number. But yeah, one of the reasons why it reminds me of the 363 is that this thing has clearly got two control stands, and one for each direction of travel. I'll sit in the driver's seat and set the master key. Hang about. There's not really a lot of detail there with that master key. I mean, that's not even a key. That's the reverser, or it's some sort of lever, anyway. Okay, cab light off. We don't need that. The brake key. That's what I've seen. I've seen that sort of thing on like the BR143 electric locomotive and the Doppelstockwagen coaches. Let's get the brake I would assume this is what the Americans would call the independent... Oh, no, that's the wrong way. I would assume that this lever would be the... Oh, so it's not the independent brake. Ah, there it is. That's the top lever there. Yeah, the independent brake, I think, is meant to just control the brakes on the locomotive. And is it just me, or does the driver... I don't think I've ever noticed this before, where an engine is very... where the driver is sat... in my opinion, at least, it looks... This feels like we're sat quite a fair way back from the controls. Right, so from what I gather, in this scenario, we've got to change... or we've got to get some wagons in this yard just near Aschaffenburg Hauptbahnhof, and then take the whole lot down to some, I think, a dockyard. I mean, the scenario is called Aschaffenburg Dock Delivery, so that leads me to think that we'll be going to some dockyards. Now, what does that LL mean? I would have thought they'd just say idle. The way that engine sounds at this point, to me it reminds me of those horrible old Iron Horse House engines in Train Simulator. Or like that were brought out for Train Simulator many years ago, and they were kind of notorious for having really poor quality sounds that sounded more like washing machines, at least in the case of like the DMUs, like the class 117. I just thought might as well see what the horn sounds like, because I haven't tried it before. Well, if I'm honest, that was very underwhelming. I mean, I must stress that I'm absolutely no expert on these things in real life. Someone else chattering in the hallway. Anyway, yeah, I'm absolutely no expert on the 204s in real life, so obviously, as I said earlier, I cannot certainly can't comment on the accuracy of the engine sounds, and the same goes for the horn. At least I've got that basic effect right, where it's quite just like in real life. It's loud. It's like you hear a little bit more noise when you've got the cab windows open. This is interesting. I didn't realise we'd be going into a non-electrified siding. But that's the other thing with this 204 is that I mean, when Main-Spessart Bahn was first released, and even now, it still only comes with 2 electric locomotives, which are the BR146/2 freight and the BR185/2 for passengers. No, wait. No, the 146/2 is for passengers, and the 185/2 is for freight. I'm not sure how I got those two mixed up. Let's see if we can get a reflection shot. Yeah, that's probably good enough. But yeah, there were some parts of some extra sidings that Dovetail Games added to the route that you couldn't get to, because this looks like I just never noticed this. This is like an old abandoned roundhouse. Honest, I think it certainly looks like an old roundhouse that's just been abandoned. Like I know this has got nothing to do with the BR204, but in all the years I've had Main-Spessart Bahn, I've never noticed that in the times that I've gone in and out of these sidings here in Aschaffenburg, I've never noticed this. What is this? I think it is it does look like an abandoned roundhouse. And what was I saying before I noticed the roundhouse? Oh yeah. Even though the route only came with electric locomotives, and for the longest time we were only able to drive electrics on this route, there were still some sidings where you couldn't get to because they weren't electrified. Like there was that whole dockyard complex around Aschaffenburg where that was diesel only. And obviously, I guess that's what presumably what Rivet Games were trying to solve, is that problem of not being able to get to those diesel-only sidings. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but either way, to me that horn sound just seems far too quiet. That's probably close enough to try coupling up. Those all look like wagons. Let's have a look. Oh no, Shinnons. I think that's how you would say that. Don't quote me on that, of course. Because I know next to nothing about. It's a random sleeper. Alright, let's try to get a screenshot of the engine with the wagons. So why not? Just realised I'll need to reconfigure the lights to have them going to switch them on at this end. Let's get back in. I must stress that these reactions that I'm having to this engine, they are all completely genuine, because as I've said, this is my first attempt at driving the BR204, and first impressions are a bit mixed, if I'm honest. Just forward, back active. This is like a similar procedure to what you would do if you were changing ends in like a push-pull consist. Like if you had a locomotive at one end and like Doppelstockwagen coaches at the other. That's the other thing I just realised, is that I have no idea how powerful the 204 is. I don't even know if any of them are still in service in real life, when you think of it. Oh, that light's still on. I wonder if the marker lights down the bottom are controlled by are controlled in a similar way to how they are on the BR143. Let's see if I can sort that out. I thought there was a mug of tea for a second at this thing here, and it's a bit silly of me because obviously that wasn't a mug of tea at all. This is what I'm about to say next. This is not a criticism against Rivet Games, but what I am this is more of an issue, as I said earlier. It's like just the way this thing is designed, with the cab being so tall that the side windows are above the door. Hello, I didn't notice that earlier. That's obviously a little notice saying the maximum speed for this thing is 100 kilometers per hour. And if you were doing a run on the main line, in most places you would be able to get this thing up to a top speed. Right, I'm not entirely sure why we have to stop at this next marker here. What is it called? Yeah, it says Aschaffenburg 211. What's curious is that I don't think we've seen a single AI train at all in the time that we've been here. So I can't imagine there would be any. There's one there. BR105, freight train. One major issue I've seen with this add-on before I even bought it was the fact that for whatever reason there are just 7 services available for this thing in timetable mode. Only 7. Mind you, you could still run this thing on other routes using like that scenario designer, but I'm certain that not everyone would. Where do we have to go to set this thing? Oh, yeah. Like I'm absolutely certain that not everyone who plays Train Sim World 2 would actually, or would regularly use the scenario designer, if at all. I mean, I hardly ever use it myself, partly because I find it a little bit convoluted and tedious. And I think, as Alan Thompson once said, if memory serves, or he described the scenario designer as being a glorified quick drive. And I don't blame him. I mean, I don't like the guy, but for the most part, but credit where it's due. Just to be clear, I don't dislike Alan Thompson as a person. I just think some of the stuff he says is a bit questionable. I'll probably still piss off a lot of people by saying that regardless, but anyway. So yeah, with this BR204 locomotive, you do get the 4 scenarios for Main-Spessart Bahn, but you only get 7 timetable mode services, as I said, and obviously that's a total of 11, technically 11 services in total, which I think is just such a huge, it's just such a colossal wasted it's just wasted potential at the end of the day. Let's see if I can get a shot of the engine passing this abandoned roundhouse. Well, you'll know whether or not I decide to put that in the thumbnail. So I always try to get at least 4 screenshots when we do these sorts of runs. Okay. I'm pretty sure these wagons here would have come with the MSB route itself, because I honestly don't generally I don't bother looking to see what rolling stock comes with the locomotive add-on, like if any. And actually, come to think of it, the same goes for routes. Like, I'm only a little bit familiar with German motive power, but I know absolutely nothing about the different types of rolling stock they've got. Especially since the vast majority of the time when I drive German freight trains, be it on the main line or shunting like this, that's generally just generally a very rare thing. Yeah, the vast majority of the time I only drive passenger services, simply out of personal preference. Yeah, I was right, that is a BR185. What on earth? That's got doppelstock. That's a delivery of empty doppelstock wagon coaches. There's actually there's a scenario that comes with the MSB route where you can drive a 185 out of Gemünden and back towards Aschaffenburg with delivering presumably refurbished doppelstock wagon coaches. And I wonder if this loss is a reference to that scenario. Right, now I would assume that at this point we're going to change direction and change direction, and I'm guessing this might be the point where we actually, it looks like we'll actually be going down to the docks, which this should be interesting because it's a part of the route I've never gone to before. Where is the destination display on that coach? It's working, it just simply says Aschaffenburg. Perhaps it's also worth mentioning that at this point we're actually only about 40 kilometres from, I'm pretty sure we're only about 40 kilometres from Frankfurt am Main, which even today I still wonder why Dovetail did not bother extending the route past Aschaffenburg and onto Frankfurt. Because to me it's just yet another missed opportunity. It would have made the route a lot longer. It would have been like 92 kilometres instead of the piddly little 52. And I think, for reference, I'm pretty sure 50 kilometres is equal to only about 30 miles. So yeah, that is rather short, to say the least. There goes our 204. I'm pretty sure I think it would have been before I started doing commentary on these videos, but I'm pretty sure that somewhere on the channel a while ago I'm absolutely certain that I put up a video of me playing through that doppelstock wagon delivery scenario, and if I do remember to find it, I'll put that video up through the link in the top right corner. Speaking of other videos, at some point in the next couple of days I think I'll be going to try making a video looking at all of the German diesels that we have in TSW, which as far as I know is not many. I think as it stands now, the only German diesel engines / units that we've got in the game are obviously this, the BR204. Then you also got the BR363, which is a small 060 shunter. I think you can use that on Rursig Nord, Nachburger Dresden, and Taranto Ram. And of course, there's also the BR612, which is a diesel multiple unit that was included with that new Dresden to Chemnitz, aka Taranto Ram route. And then the Vosloch G6, which is a shunter that was, I think, made by Trains in Germany. And that was done up as an add-on for Rhein-Ruhr-Osten. Hello. Hang about. That's something I've just noticed about this engine. It's only got... I didn't know... I'm surprised it took me this long to realise, but I just noticed now that it's only got one exhaust outlet. And of course, there's just realised also that there's only one end where there's actually radiator grills. And I thought that this thing had two bonnet, or had two engines. Kind of like what I've seen with other Centre-cab diesels here in New Zealand, like especially with the DS, pretty much solely with the DSC and DSG locomotives. Those things are Centre-cab diesels, and they absolutely do have two engines. And I'm a bit puzzled as to why the BR204 here only has one engine. Hang about. There's what looks like another station. This is really quite surprising, because I had absolutely no idea that there was any stations down here. Aschaffenburg Hochschule. I always find myself getting these pronunciations wrong. But yeah, I had absolutely no idea that this station was down here. Although I'm kind of just thinking, like, oh, okay, so there's obviously another line going off down there, curving away from the line to the dockyard, and the brakes are still on a little bit. Probably not accelerating. Jeez, this is honest. I don't know what to make of this, to be honest. Like this little extension off of the main line. I mean, again, it's just. I mean, the best way I can describe it really is like even still with the addition of this BR204, I still think that this little branch line off the main line from Aschaffenburg Hauptbahnhof is still missed potential, because I don't actually know where this other line goes off to in real life, but that would have been quite interesting if that was included. Is this another tunnel? Oh, what am I saying? Of course it's another tunnel. Okay, single track without any opening wires. I don't see. This is not really the sort of thing I generally think of when I think of the railways in Germany. I usually think of like double or four track main lines with trains on the slow lines stopping at all stations, or like the freight trains and regional ice trains speeding by without stopping. That's basically Halfstricker München to Augsburg in a nutshell right there. I might have to do some, once I've finished this run, I might have to do some digging and like a little bit of research to try and find out, what trains serve these stations in real life. And this is obviously another station, which is obviously not meant to be disused, because obviously you've got these NPCs coming along here. Actually, come to think of it, I wonder if they say in timetable mode you'd probably have services that, well, you'd probably have like freight services with the 204 that would come down this way. I know I might be repeating myself at this point, but I really can't quite get over just how pleasantly surprised I am with this pass of Aschaffenburg. And of course, seeing this all while I'm driving this locomotive that never even or never driven properly before tonight. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't really notice in any of the other preview images I saw before buying this thing that it's only got power unit and one bonnet. If anything, it reminds me of the Niigata diesel locomotive that's at the Goldfields Railway in Waihi. If I remember, I'll put a video in the top right corner about that Niigata engine so you can get an idea of what I'm on about. That's another case where there's like a centre cab diesel locomotive with bonnets that are lower, or that are shorter in height than the cab, and yet that locomotive has only got one engine. I'm pretty sure it's... I just realised this cab, to me that looks like the cab on this BR204, that looks slightly off centre. In which case it reminds me of the DSJ locomotives. Oh, we've still got a fair way to go. And considering considering Dovetail went to the effort of putting in the full scenery for this this extension off of the main line, why did they not add any diesel locomotives or multiple units when this route, or with the initial route pack, instead of just only including the electrics? Like, what's going on, Dovetail? Like, why did you not use this part of the line to its full potential? Come to think of it, why do you always give us these TSW products that always have a lot of missed potential? I don't think I'll ever understand the way DTG conducts themselves. Although one thing I have noticed in recent times is that they seem to be focusing a lot more of their efforts on TSW than the older train simulator. And I don't really know how to feel about that, to be honest. Now, speaking of DSGs, as I mentioned earlier, that action point scored there, that is now the number of one of the DSG locomotives, 3208. Staying on external view for most of the run through this part of the countryside, because mainly just to see as much of the scenery as I can, rather than being confined to just being in the driver's view. Thus, you can even see here, like just how, like you can barely see, you can't really see that much of the scenery. It's 10 o'clock at night in New Zealand, but as I record this. So everything I just realised is that to go to bed before too long. I need to get up fairly early in the morning to go off and see some real trains. That's one thing you don't like about TSW, is that this distance counter here, that it's not like in the old train simulator where it counts down the track or the distance to go by the length of the track itself. It does it as the crow flies, which I just think is quite bizarre. I'm not sure why. Dovetail scripted it that way. It's just so confusing. Like, there's these two entire stations. There's these extra two entire stations on this part of Main-Spessart Bahn. There's like this little branch. So, again, it's just so bizarre. Like, why did Dovetail initially go to the effort of modelling all the scenery, only for it to not really be used at all, even with the 204, even though the 204 is now in the game, and as I already mentioned, the almost complete lack of available services. I could even ask this to Rivet Games, like, why would they go to the effort of modelling in this locomotive and adding all the sounds and physics and what have you, only for it to barely have any use. Especially when, as I said, there's technically only 11 services available for this thing, not counting whatever you might choose to do in scenario design, but I've already said my piece on that, so I won't make myself sound like a broken record. Those all look like allotments, or rather, this lot just looks like it's obviously allotments, but it just looks like whoever was in charge of building this part of the route in the game just came along and copied and pasted the same two assets over and over again. It's like, it just looks quite lazily made, if I'm honest. What's that over there? That just looks like a boring old van. 1-200 grade. Going downhill as well. Some brakes, of course. You'd think that Dovetail would have included a diesel locomotive with this route when it was first released, so that these extra lines around Aschaffenburg would actually have some use. There's a crossing. Although, good luck to any motorists if they were stopped at that crossing in real life and one of these things came along. With a horn that quiet, it's like, why bother putting the horn on in the first place if it's that quiet? There's another crossing. It's like the Hempstead branch. Hempstead branch of the Long Island Railroad, of course. Actually, come to think of it. I remember LIRR is one of those routes that I remember I used to drive on quite often about a year ago, but I've since realised that, in my honest opinion, based on what other videos I've seen, it's, in my opinion, Long Island Railroad is one of the worst routes in TSW. I mean, I've just throughout this whole thing with the 204, occasionally brought up this concept, like the idea of missed potential, and really the LIRR route absolutely screams missed potential. There's just so, I won't go into any specific details, but suffice to say that there is so much missing from the LIRR route in this game that it's not funny. Really, nowadays that route is only good for featuring in very occasional like rail planning videos. Or, come to think of it, when that Metro North Harlem line is released, I might try to do a comparison between the Metro North and Long Island versions of the M3 and M7 trains. Although the Metro North versions are, for whatever reason, called M3A and M7A. Yet the LIRR units don't have the A suffix. Right, arriving at these yards, and I don't remember exactly what we're going to do once we've brought this lot to a stop on the sidings. That's been typical, only realising the headlight controls when it's pretty much too late. Yeah, but as I was saying earlier, it is like the 143 where you have separate controls for the main headlight as well as each of the two marker lights. For the most part, this, despite being a Rivet Games product and me not really liking them at all, this 204, in my honest opinion, isn't too bad. Like those brake squeal, the sound of the brake squeal does certainly feel it does certainly seem quite accurate. Well, not accurate, but at the very least somewhat authentic. Actually, I wonder if there's any option to put on handbrakes on these wagons. There is. I think just one should be enough. Right, what do we do next? Aside from wait for this ruddy thing to clear the instruction. No, to go forward and stop another side. Yeah, so it's like the 363, there's no handrails down the side to prevent from falling over. Yeah, even if this thing was converted to run on 3'6" gauge, there's no way it would be able to run in New Zealand, simply because from what I can tell, the cab, and just the whole locomotive in general, is far too tall. Headlights on. Yes, pretty typical. Only finally you figure out how to work the headlights properly when you're already a fair way into the run. Oh, that's our last instruction. We only have to pull forward to this one stop point, and then that's the scenario. Mind you, it did say in the you saw in the menu at the start that this thing is only meant to take 20 minutes, but probably because of me yabbering on like an idiot and not really travelling to the speed limit back in Aschaffenburg. I don't know for certain how long it is now, but you'll know when you see the length of the video before you start watching. And if you have lasted this long, I thank you for that. I mean, it's one thing to make these videos and enjoy the process of making videos, but it's a whole other thing where other people watch it or take the time to watch these videos, and if they actually enjoy it, that's even better. Obviously, I'm not saying that you're not allowed to hate these sorts of things, but obviously constructive criticism is well, I'm not saying I necessarily welcome it, but I don't have a problem with that sort of thing. Okay, I just realised that what I've just said is very confusing. So I think before I confuse myself anymore, I think I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, first impressions on the DB BR204 by Rivet Games. Really mixed, to be honest. Like, it's no fault of Rivet Games themselves, but in my opinion, this really is an ugly locomotive. I mean, the only reason I got it, I think, was just... Yeah, the only reason I got this thing was to just fill in that gap that this route had without a diesel to run on it. I don't know if I don't know if these engine sounds are accurate or not, but either way, they still remind me of those really old Iron Horse house products in Train Simulator. Yeah, I mean, I've only got one IHH product, Class 44 Peak, and yeah, it's not good. I just realised I have no idea what type of power unit the BR204 has. If I remember, I'll try to look that up when I get a chance. Yeah, the horn sound. That is just really, really underwhelming. I mean, it probably, for all I know, it probably is accurate, but if that such a quiet horn sound is accurate, how would you be able to hear that from a distance? Like if you were at a crossing with your car or waiting while you're out walking, and like you'd probably only be able to hear like it'd probably be, even if it was relatively close, it'd probably be like someone whispering. It's that quiet. Yeah, I mean that was. Oh, yes, I certainly did hang around much longer than I was thinking I would. But, yeah, thank you for watching, and Hope you've enjoyed my first look at the Deutsche Bahn BR204, and I hope that you'll stick around for more TSW videos coming fairly soon, as well as obviously whatever other railway subjects I can think of. Yeah, take care everyone, and I will see you next time.